Okay, Simon. So get started. What is your before you make with Terry the core design company? What is your first approach to the computers on the school or with friends? What is your first approach?
Yeah, well, back in I'd always wanted to make movies when I was a kid. I was always really fascinated with movies. I wanted to get an 8mm camera, and
Hmm.
I'd always been drawing, and I wanted to animate and make my art move. But unfortunately, I didn't get one. And in 1981, I went round to a friend's house, and my friend had got a ZX81. He'd
Uh-huh.
built it out of a kit with his dad, and he showed it to me. It absolutely blew my mind. I'm like, hang on a moment. Can I change the Space Invaders? These were little A's running around the screen. Well, actually, the screen kept switching on and off as you did it. And he's like, yeah, you could do if you just change this. I was like, wow, I've got to get myself one of those. So I started to save, and with a little help from my parents, I bought myself a BBC Model A computer, which is it was a British computer made by Acorn Computing at the time. Saved up, got one of those in May of '82, and of course there was no software out there. There was a great version of Defender, a great version of Pac-Man, and that was it. And so it was like, well, how do I do it? So I just sat down, learned BASIC, learned 6502 assembler, and started making my own games. And then a friend of mine, who you'll know from the high score table on Rick Dangerous Stu
Hmm.
Gregg, he was a friend of mine at school, and he kept coming round because I got a computer, and was like, you should do something with this. I would like written this little game with a little guy with a jetpack flying from one side of the screen to the other and taking stuff back. And so I put it on a tape, sent it off to Micropower in Leeds, and they came back with a list of changes and said, if you make these 10 changes, we'll publish it. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I did that. So at sort of 16, 17, I got my first game published on BBC Micro, and that was brilliant. Um, so I was doing my A levels, which is the sort of the exams you do between 16 and 18 in the UK, and came out of that. Didn't do too great in my grades because I'd spent more time with computers. But then I went on to what we call a polytechnic, kind of a university type thing, and went and did a computer studies course. At the same time, I'm doing a Saturday job in a nearby city called Derby,
Hmm.
and there my Saturday job was working in a computer shop where we were selling games and everything. And I got to know everybody who were the regulars coming in, and it was there that I met the likes of Terry Lloyd, Rob Toon, Andy Green, Chris Shrigley, all the guys that were part of the initial group that when course started up.
Hmm.
And anyway, those guys over the years, they'd been getting their heads together, and they made Bounder in their spare time for the Commodore 64, which was amazing because Terry had done all the graphics, and every single thing they wrote using a monitor. So it was literally hand coding, converting the assembler code into the monitor and sticking it in the memory. But they got the job at Gremlin whilst I was still doing my studies, and every Saturday they'd be coming in going, "You want to come along?" I was like, "No, I'm going to do my studies." So I did my studies, got to the end of them, and did pretty well. And then I thought, right, I'm going to go into serious computing. So I started a programming job, and the programming job was a local company, and what they did was they made desktop publishing software.
Hmm.
So this was the time of Ventura Publisher on the Mac, where it was the first time that you could actually draw what you wanted to see on the page, and they were doing big high-end typesetting software, and they wanted a graphical front end. I thought, oh, this is good, graphics. So anyway, for 5 months, I'm building mouse interfaces, and this was the time when we were still working out what you did with a right click and a left click and all that lot, because mice were completely new at that time. Right. Anyway, so 5 months go by, and I get a phone call from Terry saying we need some graphics. We've got a freelance job at Gremlin working on Masters of the Universe, the computer game based on the movie. Would you be interested? And I thought, well, I'm coding in my spare time, so during my day, and I could do some graphics. I can draw Dolph Lundgren in the evenings. This is fine. So I went along with a bunch of discs and went, well, this is what I'd do. And they went, do you want a job? So like, what, like a full-time job? And yeah. All right then. So I spoke to my fiance, who's now my wife, and said, "What do you reckon? Should we give it a go?" So she went, well, you can give it a go. You can always go back to serious computing if you want. So I gave it a go, and now in 2013, I've been giving it a go for 30 years or something like that kind of thing, and I've never looked back, and it's been wonderful. So I then started off, my first proper job, a full-time job in the games industry, was working as a graphic artist with the Gremlin Derby team, and then we worked for probably 6 or so months on various different games, from Master the Universe, Skate Crazy and stuff. And then in the background, because I was there with a bunch of guys that really knew what they were doing, it's like, well, okay, I want to learn how to code again. How do you do it? And Andy Green gave me this piece of code. It's about this big. It was the bit that I couldn't figure out, which was how you completely switch off all of the stuff on an Atari ST and basically turn it into a huge, big heap of memory you can just play around with. And once I'd got that, I got going, and I started coding. And at the time, I started working on Switchblade in my spare time. That was my spare time project. So writing away at that, and then 6 months later, Jeremy, who's the sales or marketing manager of Gremlin, came to us and said, "Look, Gremlin are going to be shutting down this little satellite office, but if you'd like, you can come along and work for me, and we'll set up." And that's where Core Design came from. So we did that, and then the situation was we need some games. So Terry and I put our heads together, and then I kind of volunteered, well, I can write the ST version. So I ended up writing the ST version, the Amiga version, doing half of the graphics and some of the design and everything, and we made this Rick Dangerous game in 4 months, and that's what really got me going. So yeah, that's kind of the potted history of Simon.
And what do you think about the people like you on the early 80s and the late the start in the 90s was as known as the bedroom programmers, people who study at the college or the university to start in programmer and in our own houses with the old computer, with no team, just alone starting to program their own games, and as people like you put it on the streets and try to sell it that well. What do you think on the present time there is no people like that?
Well, it's a strange thing. For many years we haven't had it, and I think actually there's now a resurgence of this, because what happened was, I was going to say, we all sort of started because the computers were really accessible. You could buy one, you could open it up. I mean, literally, you could add bits to it and everything, and they were all designed to be, immediately able to program them and get into them. And then, of course, what then happened is that over the years, once we got past the Amiga, consoles came in. They were boxes that you had to have a special development system and special permission to write on. Windows came in and became just really difficult to code for. You had to be a specialized PC coder. And also the other thing about with PC, up until recently, the vast variety of drivers and hardware and everything was just standing in your way. And I think you can say for a good 2 decades and more, it was a thing that that world was locked off. If you weren't in there and you weren't programming on development kits, you didn't get a chance in. But I think what's actually happening now is that with the advent of the internet, and this is one of the things actually I'm now doing a little bit of speaking at schools and everything, I think there's never been a better time to get into making your own games, because you can now go online, and there are, I mean, with HTML5 canvas now, you can you literally need just a text editor, and you can write your own 2D game that will run on any computer. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And that's sort of something I started tinkering with a couple of years ago, and it's like, there's something in this. And of course now there are masses and masses of free tools out there. So, you can go online, you can get SketchUp, you can get Blender, you can get GIMP, Paint.net, MyPaint, all of these things, fully featured, art packages and 3D packages that allow you to build graphics. And in fact, actually, at the moment we're in a prototyping phase at work. I'm using Blender to build stuff for the game that we're working on, because it's there. And then, of course, there's other sort of suites of stuff. I mean, Unity is a marvelous piece of work, and one of the things that my son, his friends, and all of the schools I've talked to are like, right, okay, if you can't afford a Raspberry Pi, and that's what £20 or $30 or something like that, and that's all you need, an SD card and an internet connection for long enough to do it, then just go online, download Unity, download Blender, and have a go. And I think there's one of the sort of exciting things about this time now is that with this amount of open source and free software, I think we're in a place where there is this resurgence. And what's really encouraging as well is the whole app culture as well. That is now getting to a point where, you know, a couple of people can get together and go, you know, we can actually build something, put it out there, try it, and the other exciting thing as well is that apps give you something that we had back then as well, was the ability to try and fail many times. So with an app, it's very, very low cost to make. There is the model of, you know, there are the sort of the model of just putting it out there and seeing whether it works and see whether anybody goes for it, and you make another one and try it. Also the idea of in-app purchases. So you only need to build a little bit and then extend the game and then extend the game. And you're getting immediate feedback saying, yeah, this is great, we want more of it, or no thanks. And I think that was one of the things that was wonderful for us when we were, you know, in those early years, was it was taking maybe 4, 5, 6 months to make a game. You try ideas, you put them out there, and you go through the whole cycle many times, so you get better. And the sort of the sad thing is for many years, game development timelines have been so big. You start something 2 years ago and you make a mistake, and you kind of, you know, or you do something less optimal, and it's not another 2 years before you get the chance to try that again or try a different approach. Or even sometimes the thing of you get to a phase in a project and you're like, what did we do 2 years ago? And half the team wasn't here and other people have come in and stuff like that. So, you know, I think it's that sort of wonderful, rapid trying, failing, and improving cycle. And I think actually now we've got to a point where that can happen again in a way that it hasn't for easily 2 decades. So yeah, no, it's really exciting.
So when you create or when you join the core design company, first game will be always starting to programming on the 16-bit machines, or you make the code for the Spectrum, for the Amstrad APC, or you choose the 16 bits to start the programming, and then you port to other computers.
Yeah, the thing that we did with the first games, particularly say Rick was the prime example, was we knew that we had to cover all the bases. So what we did was just made a few very simple calls where we knew we could pretty much do anything on the Amiga and the Atari. So what we did was, well, okay, then we need to be able to use 256 characters for the backgrounds on the Commodore 64. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that the number of we actually built the levels out of 256 8x8 characters that were then in blocks of 16, and then kind of did that. So we kind of took the mapping method for the Commodore because of the hardware limitation. Then came the sprites. It was like, well, we could spend vast amounts of time, months, redrawing our sprites to be a slightly different scale. It's like, well, why don't we just choose the one that's, you know, the 24 by 21 high pixel aspect that we've got on the Commodore, and then what we'll do is we'll draw them nice and high detailed on the 16-bit computers. That will translate down to the Spectrum, and then what we'll then do is do you know, kind of double the pixels wide on the Amstrad, and then do the trick of overlaying 2 sprites on the Commodore, where you can get that nice outline sort of thing. So there were those sort of things, and it was like, okay, then right, well, vertical scrolling on all machines is kind of possible, but we need to go sort of in a kind of page flick kind of mode for the Spectrum. Okay, we'll do that. Sideways scrolling, you'll never get any of these things apart from the Amiga. So it was all of these little sort of you know, kind of compromises and just sort of honing ourselves in. And then, of course, the map size, it was, we decided to go 256 pixels wide, for that situation of, well, we could build it to the full width of the Amiga, but we will then spend maybe a couple of months rebuilding all the levels just to fit on the Spectrum. So it just didn't make sense to be wasting all that effort. Better to concentrate on the core and then make it work out. So that was sort of the approach. So yeah, where we could do, there were little bits and pieces that, you know, I remember some of the sprites on the Atari and Amiga were the full 32 pixels wide because we could, and it didn't impact the gameplay. So we did a few bits like that, but we tried to, you know, kind of fit within all those little constraints, because then it meant that we were all traveling faster and we weren't wasting time on something that really wasn't the essential part of the game.
The first Rick Dangerous, a great success. After your program, somebody tested before give us to me the game.
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, the funny.
Anyone tested? Because it's very difficult.
Oh man.
Well, you can finish it as well because you have several number of lives.
Oh.
But the difficulty of the Rick Dangerous was part of the business on the early 80s. I will make a very difficult game for the people in order to expand a long time of the game, or just a question of...
well, I think it was one of the... Yeah, I mean, it was coming out of the arcades. I mean, funnily enough, we've now got a main cabinet at work, and we're playing them. I'm as bad as I am now as I was back then. So I suppose the thing is that we came out of the world of the arcade game, where it was, you know, you make one slight move and you're dead, and that's it. So we kind of were building upon that. I guess, you know, we'd had Manic Miner before us and everything, which was negotiating these screens. But I think the thing was with Rick, and it's only recently I've realised this, was back then most other platform games you had all of the sprites moving in a nice regular pattern, so you just took it at your own pace, went right, okay, then I'm going to make this jump, he's going to do this, I'm going to do that. What we did was we looked at Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and we'd seen that first section and thought, wouldn't it be brilliant if you're being chased by a boulder and there's blow darts and you're having to react and all this kind of stuff. So I came up with this really insultingly simple system that allowed us to create a massive variety of different ways to kill Rick. So what we did was we created a game with the difficulty of Manic Miner, but none of the pattern kind of play. It really was a case of, I will travel here, it'll fire a bullet, next time it'll do it from a different angle, now we're going to crush you with a rock, now we're going to set you on fire, now we're going to, you know, drop an asteroid on you. It was that kind of thing. So in our excitement to create this sort of memory death trap, to go, hey, we can make all of these things, but we'd still got the difficulty of the slightly more leisurely, here's a monster, jump over it, it's travelling on a path, now take the next one. So it was this kind of confluence of the two, and so that's probably why it was viciously difficult and stuff. And also the other thing as well, and it's as true today as it ever has been, is when you're working on a game, you get used to it. So if you're working on something that's got bad control, unless you've got somebody with an objective eye that comes in and goes, you know what, that's doing something wrong, you unconsciously work your way around it. When it comes to playing a game that's working fine, you know it inside out. You can visualize all the triggers that nobody else sees when it comes out of the box, and so you know when you're anticipating it and everything. And so there are many situations over the past 3 decades where it's too difficult, but I can play it, and you get this kind of thing. And I do remember there is one jump on the second level of Rick, where you're in the Egyptian temple and you have to do like a double jump over a couple of blow darts. The original version of that was impossible, and we all had a very heated discussion about, look, I can't do it. It's dead easy. You drop down here, you jump 3-4 times, and then on the 4th bounce you jump, and then you hold, and then you jump again like that. And it's like, I can't do it, you can do it, yeah, you know, sort of thing. How's anybody? And we reined it in. So believe it or not, the version that came out was actually easier than the one that we had in development, and that was the first time that made me think, whoa, hang on, there is this disconnect. But it is something that, because you're so close to it, because you're living it, breathing it every day, you have a vast amount of insight into how the game works, and it's a constant you just constantly have to remind yourself to step back and go, what's it like coming in? And even now, that's one of the things that we constantly challenge ourselves on, and my friends at Criterion, it really is that thing of, right, come on then, are we doing it right? Because you can just get so close that you can't see the big picture. So it's very tough. But yeah, the original Rick, before we went out, it was even harder. But yeah, I think it was this. We were really excited with what we can do, and kind of went in with a great deal of glee.
So then the second read includes the option to play the worlds separately. You can play the World 1, World 2, just for trying, you know. Do you think that is a very good option for the players in order to discover the game before starting the whole adventure?
Yeah, well, this was one of those kind of things. We just decided to mix it up, and we realised we didn't have to make a linear storyline. I mean, so that the original Rick was just sort of 4 little episodes that were thrown together, and it was this thing of like, well, we'll create a beginning, which is kind of the day the Earth stood still. We'll create an end piece, and actually you can go and visit these various different Flash Gordon-like locations in any order. So it was just a sort of a fun way of mixing it up, that you could sort of take your way through the game however you wanted. So now looking back on the game, if somebody had gone checkpoints, saves, that would probably even been even better. But
and about the types of the Rick Dangerous and the other enemies of the game, looks like is you was inspired on a comic from Guillermo, isn't it?
Yes, Mordillo is a. I always remember when I was kind of growing up in the 70s, in those sort of poster shops that you used to get, used to have these massive posters with loads and loads of tiny little men. I think it was, I believe, Mordillo is a Spanish artist, I think. But anyway, I just remember seeing them and thinking they were amazing. And then when it came to sort of doing Rick, there was something in my head that sort of said that. And then there was a Spectrum game called Joe Blade that had been out, and had these sort of slightly squashed characters. And I was like,
Joe Blade.
Yeah, I'd love to do something like that. So that's where those two sort of came together. So it was a little bit of that, and also Asterix as well, all kind of coming in to these characters. A little bit of Tintin as well. So I think it was all that sort of smooshing together, bit of Indiana Jones and 21 pixels high. So that was sort of the fun. But no, it was Mordillo was definitely an influence that has just sort of sat at the back of my brain. One day you'll do something with it. So yeah.
So very funny. And then about the portability to 8-bit computers. Is there any time that you have to put the game little than the other version in levels, number of enemies, number of screens? You have to cut that number of screens in order to make the game playable and the game in, I don't know, 128K. So
yes, I'm trying to remember. This is a really one back, but so brain is going. I think we did some additionally larger levels on the 16-bit. So this is really testing my memory here, and it will have been that thing of we can fit so much in a Spectrum, but we can do more. So we actually turned around, and when it came to sort of pitching it, we said, look, we can add extra screens and stuff, because we did have plenty of memory. It was the wonderful thing was the fact that the games when the guys were fitting them into a Spectrum, they were kind of cramming in every last byte. I'm sitting back there with the luxury of the big 16-bit machines and going, whatever you like, sort of thing. We're having little jokey sort of memory whip browns of like, I need half a K. I've got 10 here. You can have. So that was the thing of when we did get the opportunity. It was that thing of, it's not going to hurt us. All we need to do is design more screens, and we had a great with both games. Great little set of custom editors that Rob Toon and Dave Pridmore worked on, that allowed us just to, in data, just going with a joystick, draw screens and stuff, put down triggers, and sort of define boxes. And the one that that we had for Rick 2 was really quite sophisticated, because traps could have all sorts of different states at that point. The original Rick 1 stuff was basically you had a single detection box that waited for Rick, a stick, a bullet or dynamite to enter it, and then what it would then do was take the sprite that was there, set it into animation and make it move, and so that could repeat, and that was basically the entire of the Rick trap system. The thing that that Dave designed for us for Rick 2, none of us understood it, but we knew it worked, and it was one of those things. It was optimized to work into, it fit in the memory of a Spectrum, so all of the data was highly compressed and compacted into numbers of bits and everything. So what he did was he actually wrote the system and designed and wrote the system to do all the things that we wanted it to do, which was this ability to have synchronized things and stop things, pause them, restart them, change states, you name it, do all that lot. And then when he'd got it, it was each of us individually spent a couple of days with him going, right, so here's your Z80 listing, I'm now converting it, what do I need to do? And we were literally line by line converting the system, because it was so complicated, and only Dave really knew how it operated, that we got the stuff across. So it was a nice cross collaboration. But yeah, when we got to use those editors to make greater levels, we really cut loose and added more when we got the option.
So many fans at the end of the Rick Dangerous 2, you give us an open end.
Yes.
Maybe many fans were waiting for the Rick Dangerous 3. It was an option, or you maybe think that Rick's history is well done, not necessary to a third part.
Yeah, it was one of those things that we did. As I say, we got to the end of it and we said, right, okay, then we'll send him off on another adventure. And I think what happened was that everything sort of moved on from there. Let's think. I was just trying to think of what my next set of stuff was, but I ended up going off and doing things like Wolf Child and all that lot, because one of the things was I had been doing a lot of cartoony stuff, and it was that thing of, actually I want to do something a bit meatier with more realistic characters, and so I think actually, I'm trying to remember the time, but there was that sort of drive of let's move ahead in different directions. There was no real sort of call of we must have a Rick Dangerous 3, but I'd always sort of fancied Rick as this sort of kind of Maltese Falcon, kind of gumshoe film noir sort of thing would perhaps go there. I don't. It'd be interesting to see where he could end up. Whether when we'd project him forwards into the 70s, go Austin Powers on him, I don't know now, sort of thing. But when back then I was sort of thinking, I was imagining him to appear somewhere, and it's going to be big, strong shadows, trench coat, and all this kind of stuff. But no, it'd be quite funny to see where we actually ended up. But yeah, we deliberately left it open-ended and thought, hey, one day we might go back, but we never did. So he's somewhere off in the cosmos having some adventures.
And what do you think about the Rick Dangerous remake? Actually, that we have Wii versions, PC versions. Man. Do you think the remakes must be exactly at your games, or is funny to have any features on
I think it's wonderful. I think it's incredibly touching. I say it is one of those sort of things that Rick. He was a part of my life for all this lot, and to have people do, because I know how long it takes to do all this stuff. So to have people turn around and go, you know what? I mean, it blew my mind anyway when guys got in touch with me and said, hey, I've recoded it for Flash. Pascal, he did a version for Game Boy Advance and sent me the cart, and then the guys had done a Christmas version and everything. I think it's amazing and incredibly touching and wonderful, and I love the way that everybody's sort of gone, we could take it and do this and everything. So it's wonderful and amazing that people have done that with it, sort of thing. It is one of those things that you make a game, you hope everybody enjoys it, but then you have to move on to the next one, and then to have people like yourself and the people that contacted me over the years and go, you know what, this really meant a lot to me, this really entertained me, it represents a time in my life. That is
the point.
Phenomenal. sort of
That
thing.
is the point, because when we get Rick Dangerous for the very first time, there was about 3 friends of mine at home with the Commodore Amiga, and we are playing for hours at the first level, and rah, rah, and it was funny, because the game was at the beginning, where you don't know about the traps, where you have to try and fail, you have to try and learn.
Yes.
So at the first time, even when you death on the same trap for several times, even again and again and again, my friends and me was having a great time, even when you death one more time,
Yes.
So it's funny that's a very difficult game and very dangerous for me and for other 15, 16 years on time. It was funny, and we have a great time with it.
It's wonderful. I mean, the first experience that really brought it home to me was probably about 18 months after we'd made Rick 1. We got a letter, an actual physical on piece of paper letter sent to the office where we were in Derby from somebody in Saudi Arabia saying, I've played Rick and this, that, and the other. And that was like, that blew my mind. It was like, there are people out there in countries that I'll never go to, that I will never meet. I've entertained them for an amount of time, and it's motivated them, not in just to say, hey, that was cool, I'll play it again, but to actually sit down, write a letter, and then send it all that way. Especially back then, you couldn't even tweet or email or anything like that, and so that kind of did it. And I'd say over the years, the lovely people that got in touch and said, hey, I really love that. It's wonderful, because let's say you're constantly thinking towards the future. What's the thing that we're working on now? What's the thing that's going to be 2 years from now? And it is about staying current and doing it. But it's wonderfully heartwarming when somebody comes around and goes, you know what, I really love that, and I hated that section, and wah, you kind of get all this sort of stuff. Which
That's another game that I have my own was the Switchblade, another different type of game. After start to programming any game at Core Design, who was or you or maybe the whole team has the idea to decide next game will be a platform game, action game. It's a whole team decision or someone?
It was let's think. I'm just trying to think. Actually, it was when we started as Core. It was we were working as a developer for hire, so we would pitch out so many games, as well as accepting jobs and sort of thing, could you do this? So if I remember rightly, back in the early days, we had sort of 2 teams of us. We had we were sort of like kind of 2 groups of maybe 4 or 5 working together. Terry would jump between a couple of projects. I'd be working on one, Rob and Andy would be working on the other. And so what we had was a situation that we'd be doing Rick, those guys would be doing the conversion of Action Fighter from the Master System to the home consoles. And those sort of things would happen. Something like the Monty Python game we did, that was Virgin coming to us and going, right, we've got Judge Dredd or Monty Python. I'm like, Judge Dredd, Monty Python. Okay, which was kind of probably because of the fact that we did a great cartoony platform game in Rick, and so it was like, oh, we want more of this. And then they turned around and went, we like what you did in Rick Dangerous, but we don't want you to do that. Okay, so I think they were fearing that we would just repaint Rick and sell it back to them, so we went on a completely different journey with that, and in the end they came back and went, some of those things that you put in Rick Dangerous, could we have them in there? Okay, so we kind of think, and that was a completely chaotic journey all of its own. I could spend an hour telling you about that, but yeah, it was one of those kind of things that we would occasionally pitch ideas, then other stuff would come in. I'm just trying to think of other stuff that things like the Dynamite Ducks arcade machine conversion the guys did. That was a job for hire of like, hey, we've got there was Forgotten Worlds and Dynamite Ducks around at the time. You guys seem to do cartoony well. Can you do the Dynamite Ducks conversion and everything? So it was a little bit of the both. And then when Core turned publisher, that was very much a case of we came up with ideas and then just went for it, and often that idea would be as simple as a sprite. Lee, who worked on Chuck Rock, that was one of the first things he did, was just sort of sit there doodling around one day and came up with a character sprite that looked hilarious, and it was like, can we make a game about that big caveman? Yeah. And so yeah, it was very, you know, free to go and experiment, which was a really cool thing. I say sometimes we had conversion work or you know, kind of stuff for hire. Other times we'd pitch. So it was a mixture of all sorts of things. And then the other thing as well is that, you know, your personal desire to do something different. So, you know, kind of the thing with Switchblade, that was just a project I'd started in my spare time to teach myself how to program, so I just went off and built that, and at the same time I'm making Rick and Python and all these other things during the day. Something like Wolfchild was, I wanted to do something with realistic sprites because I was a big fan of Strider by Capcom and all those big arcade machines, so I was like, oh well, I'd love to make one of those. We know how to make platform games, we'd do it. And so that's kind of the way that it went, you know, sort of thing over those years.
So at the on the company is was usual. So what are you telling me to keep working on several projects at the same time, or do you prefer to start with Dangerous, finish it, and then start with another one? Or as you're telling me, you were involved in some projects at the same time?
Well, I'd say what I was doing was I was working full-time on one project at a time, but I was writing Switchblade over a period of 18 months at home. And it was this thing that it was, what I did with Switchblade was, when I'd started Gremlin, was like, well, okay, then I just wanted to make a platform game because I hadn't even thought of Rick at that point. So I just started working in my spare time, and then that got my ability to program up to a certain level that I could start programming Rick. So I'd be working on Rick during the day, going home at night, carrying on with Switchblade. And what was happening was, my rookie code that I was writing for Switchblade took me 18 months to complete, whereas I was getting better and better during the day at work. So towards the end of Switchblade, I was just through spaghetti. The code was terrible and it was all holding together, and I was writing stuff that, you know, at work that was 2 years further down the line from it, and it was quite an experience to sort of finish work, come back and sit there going, what's this? But I knew I had to just keep on moving forwards, because if I rewrote it I'd lose time, and I wanted to get the game done. So
core designs was under that activity in 2006, maybe?
Yes, I guess so, yeah.
So you were in core design all the time, all the core design lists, or you moved to another company?
No,
after 16-bit era, you moved to another company?
Yeah, I left core in 94, about after 7 years, and then I went and worked with the guys up at Aklaim up in Teesside, which is just north of here, Darren and Jason Falkus, and what they were doing was they worked for the big American Aklaim, which was really exciting, working for a huge publisher. I'd been to CES back then, and then, which I don't know whether it had become E3 by that point, and remember going and standing in front of the Aklaim stand, and they had Batman and NBA Jam and all of these things. I'm like, I'd love to work there. So when I got the opportunity to go and join those guys, I hopped up there. At that point I was I'd had to when I used to sort of do the coding and the art and the design, every so many years it was like, you can't do all the jobs now. I'm like, okay then. So I gave up the coding whilst I was at core and continued on with the art and the design. When I went up to Teesside, the guys were like, well, are you an artist or a designer? I'm like, well, tell you what, I'll carry on my design skills because you've got some better artists than me. So I went in as full-time as a designer, but that didn't stop me from kind of getting involved doing a bit of art. And I think over the years, as projects have gone on, I'll get the opportunity to get my Photoshop or 3D modelling skills out. But yeah, so I moved on to Teesside, and my first thing there was designing, project managing College Slam, which was a college basketball game based on the NBA Jam engine. We did that in sort of 5 months. It was one of those kind of ones that I landed, they were partway through it, and it was a big sort of steering 6 or 7 formats all to finish, because they were all kind of running at the same time. And then after that, what we wanted to do was to start making original product at Teesside. So we put together a number of pitches, and eventually the guys from Aklaim, New York, sent us a big block of comic books saying, "Hey, we've just had Turok Dinosaur Hunter come out on the N64. Here's a bunch of the other comic books that we own," and they'd sent us things like Exo Manowar, Magnus Robot Fighter, Trinity Angels, and then again a comic called Shadow Man. And we sort of picked it up, took a look at it, and thought, there's something in this. This could be a lot of fun. And so we kind of went back to them and said, we've got these big plans. It's going to be a big, epic, 3D kind of Zelda, but sort of dark kind of twist on the whole thing. And then we had a glorious couple of years making that. It was incredibly creative and utterly wild ride, kind of just going all in, trying to make the most big, epic, bonkers, crazy story, huge scope and everything. And so did that. And then I think, so it was Teesside was there, so it was about 5.5 years. Aklaim started getting in trouble and we're having to pull back. So I thought, well, it's time for me to move on. And then I got the Harry Potter job at EA in 2000. So I did a load of Harry Potters, and then back in 2006, 2007, my friend Alex, who runs Criterion, kind of turned around and said, "Hey, do you want to come over here and play with the toys that we've got?" So I then moved over to those guys, and I've not looked back. It's been an incredible ride.
Yeah, and also apart from the Harry Potter, you also was involved in one Need for Speed game, the Most Wanted, maybe.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yes. Yeah. No, I was part of the multiplayer team on Most Wanted. I actually worked for Criterion for a bunch of time during the Burnout Paradise years. The Criterion offices are a long way away from where I live, so I came back home to my home in the Midlands and went and did work on GoldenEye for Eurocom. And at the end of 18 months there, the guys asked me back and said, "Hey, would you like to come back?" I'm like, "If you can move the office north." They went, "Well, tell you what, you can work from home a little bit." So that's what we've done. And so back in, a few years ago, I rejoined Criterion, and my first thing there was to join the multiplayer team and work for kind of 2 years doing the multiplayer for Most Wanted, which was fantastic, sort of thing. And it's been great over the years, when you kind of go and say the privilege of all the various different big properties to play around with, sort of thing. At times I've sort of touched Batman, James Bond, Harry Potter, Need for Speed. It's been incredibly cool to sort of go around and somebody go, "Hey, play with these toys now for a few years." Yeah, sort of thing. So yeah.
So, as for you, I suppose it was great to be on the very number of sagas as Harry Potter, Rick Dangerous, as a designer, as a coder. That is correct, no?
Yeah, it was one of those kind of things. The Harry Potter job, I was. It was about 2 years. Must be 2 years before I started it. My friend Guy, who I'd been working with for many years, bought me the first two Harry Potter books for my 34th birthday, and said, "You got to read these. They're great. My kids are reading them. They're cool." So I've read them, and then time came that I was leaving Teesside, and then it was the call came of like, "Would you like to come and work on Harry Potter?" I'm like, yeah. So I went in there as a fan, and the great thing was about when we first started, nobody had ever made a Harry Potter game, and one of the things that was really important was making sure that we were absolutely faithful to what the fans wanted, because having read it, there's an awful lot of detail. There's certain things that have to be in there. There are certain things, and kind of by the nature of the books and the detailed stuff that J.K. Rowling had put in there, you understand that, okay, Defense Against the Dark Arts, that's the 3rd floor. Transfiguration, 4th floor. There is a secret passage from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor. All those things, you know that from the book. So when we embarked on the Harry Potter games, that was the thing that we really wanted to make sure that we did. And plus also the relationship that EA had was as much with J.K. Rowling and to do with the fiction from the books, as it was Warner Brothers and the stuff from the motion pictures that were being made. So what we did was we tried to get a nice balance between it representing the world that you were seeing in the movies, but still was faithful to the book. So for the first, I'll say I worked on 4.5 of the Potters. I left partway through Order of the Phoenix. But one of the things was to try and get that sense of, you were creating this explorable world that had all of the elements that you would expect in the places that you would do, sort of thing. And when we actually started, there's J.K. Rowling herself had produced a huge document for us of some 100-odd pages that was detailing. There was kind of like her notes on Hogwarts and everything. A really privileged to ever get to read that. And it was sort of stuff that was hinting at things that would come later on in the books and everything, but it was that thing that you go, okay then, so we know that these locations have to fit together. So one of the things of that era was being, me and Guy termed ourselves the fiction police, because when we arrived, the first Harry Potter games to come out with Philosopher's Stone, the movie, were underway, and so one of the things that we did as fans of the books initially was to sort of wrestle and help the teams kind of wrestle the games into fitting in with the fiction. It's one of those kind of things of literally you can't do that. There's no precedent for it in the Harry Potter books. You can't have something just appearing or trolls in the dungeons because you like it. You've got to come up with something that's appropriate for the world. And so over the years, what we always did was made sure we made a kind of a reference back, and when we were sort of presenting all our stuff to J.K. Rowling, because she had to approve everything that we were doing, we had to give a reason. I suppose one of the things is actually just sort of backtracking. I did a game, an Asterix game back at Core, Asterix and the Power of the Gods, and that was one that Stefan and Rich actually made the game, but I was asked to come in and help with the design. And I'd been a massive fan of the Asterix books when I was a kid. And so when it came to creating the design for that, the things that stuck in my mind were, well, every Asterix book, Asterix goes on a massive journey across Europe. So you've got to have a map where you're going across Europe and everything. What was the thing? Well, it's the magic potion. So I had a stack of Asterix books this big and went through and listed every piece of magic potion ingredient that had ever been cited in this huge stack, and then made little quests about them. So when I submitted the design document to Sega, and then it went on to Les Editions Albert René, who own Asterix, they came back and they were blown away by the fact that we'd respected the fiction. And that was a great lesson, because they were like, this is fantastic, this is authentic. So when I went to move on to Harry Potter years later, I remembered that, and it was like, okay then, sort of thing. We love your books. The reason why there is a transfiguration room here is because of this. The reason there are books here because you mention them on page so and so, and that's how we worked. And it is one of those kind of things that anybody who, say, watches a Star Wars movie, plays a Star Wars game, you understand that there are certain things, you won't have trolls on a Death Star or something like that kind of thing. When you're at the very start of a big franchise, like Potter was at that point, you've got to kind of self-impose those rules and say what's right and what's wrong. And we were very much, in those early years on the Potter stuff, kind of gatekeepers on the game of going, no, it might be cool to have a giant dragon in there, but there's no precedent for them. You can't have them. They don't come in until book 4 or until a book that we haven't even read yet, sort of thing. That was the thing.
Back to the early time, now you are speaking about the Harry Potter and the fantasy and the very strange kind of worlds. At the 1992, you was instructed to make a different kind of game, and it was one the Bubba'n'Stix.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Oh yes, yes.
What about the idea that strange kind of world and strange atmosphere, those characters of the game, because you was the graphic designer of all of it.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, this was one of those things where it kind of started off as a little bit of a joke, and it kind of went on, and it kind of created its own thing. I'd done various different games, and Jeremy McCall was kind of I'd like you to do a game about a man with a stick. I think what he was saying was, actually, I want a guy with a staff, and it was about the time of sort of flashback and all that lot, where people were taking digitized images and then overdrawing them and all this kind of stuff. And I remember as sort of going, well, we could sort of do that, but it would be a little bit limited. If we were doing a realistic character, you'd have to have a guy with a staff. It would have to be yay big, and you know, you could sort of do some ninja moves with it. You could maybe pry something with it. You could poke something with it. You couldn't really pole vault with it. There was a lot of stuff that you have to do, and then what happens if you throw it? You have to go fetch the stick back and everything. And it was kind of sort of hankering back to going back and making a sort of a realistic Rick Dangerous and all this sort of stuff. And so myself and my buddy Billy Allison, who was a TV cartoon animator, who had come and joined us at Core, we just got our heads together one Tuesday evening, came back to my house with some big piece of paper and went, right, okay, Jeremy wants a game about a guy with a stick. What could we do with a stick? Let's just go as wild as we possibly can. Just go to the point of absolute utter ridiculousness, go all the way through and just see where this thing will go. Because it was this thing of, you know, we were sort of thinking at that very point was realistic characters and rotoscoped sort of digitized animation. And it was like, I'm sure you could do more. So we just started doodling. So it was just all of these crazy things. It could stretch, you could use it as a snorkel, you could do it, you poke things in the eye, you could throw it, it could come back, and we created this massive sheet of just crazy drawings. And I went in and went, oh, Jeremy, we've been thinking about your game. What do you reckon? It was like, you just got to go for it, you know, sort of thing. Give it a go. So we did. And so the world and the flavour of it all credit goes to Billy. It's his sort of stuff. He's got a really crazy sort of cartoon imagination for little wild monsters, little bystander characters and all of this sort of stuff. And coming from a non-gaming background, he was trying to challenge a lot of the conventions of how we should draw a character. So one of the things was, traditionally most video game characters are square. You know, they're a little tiny box. You know, Sonic the Hedgehog, Mario to an extent, Rick Dangerous certainly, all a nice square because they're very easy to deal with, you know, sort of thing. When you crouch down, you just make them half the height. Oh, it's simple. So Billy went, you know what? We're going to make the character really tall and thin. And then when he crouches, he's going to get wider and he's all this kind of stuff and everything. And one of the interesting things about that it does, that you kind of like when you start embarking on this, is the amount of screen space and headroom suddenly reduces because the character's taller. When the character crouches down, he's got to get wider. And what happens if he stood up against a wall? Does he kind of push out from it? All sorts of all these sort of things. So it was quite a wild challenge just technically to sort of make this thing work. But what we initially started off with was the character originally was a little green alien. He had exactly the same proportions of Bubba, bright green, tall, sticky kind of guy. And then it was that thing at some point or other, somebody said, well, could you make him human? So I remember Billy kind of turned around and went, okay then. So I took all the same proportions but made him a little Yorkshire guy with a flat cap and very Wallace and Gromit, very Aardman in that way. And then after a little while, could you make him less kind of provincial and stuff? Can you make him a bit more popular? So that's where Bubba came from. Was I think he was originally going to be called Elvis. Was a little guy with the quiff and the baseball cap and the dungarees. We couldn't call him Elvis, so he ended up getting called Bubba. Yeah, so it was sort of this. Yeah, we created this crazy little cartoon world, and say. The way we split the work there was Billy did all of the animations, all of the sprites and everything. I did the backgrounds, and we worked together. And I learned so much about animation from Billy. He's the guy that has taught me most about animation and how to draw. Not to sort of not sweat the small details like I used to. Get your anatomy right and really be expressive, and it was a joy to work with him throughout that time. Kind of just going. I remember actually. having a situation where in terms of my art, I was like, right, okay, I've drawn this. Now, how would you draw it? Well, I do this, right, okay. Why doesn't mine look as cool as yours? Go on, tell me. And I'd just corner him for an hour, just going, right, okay then, so I've done this. It still doesn't look good. Well, you could do that. Okay, then. So I was just making him constantly criticise me until I got better, and that's kind of the springboard into animating and becoming a better artist. Was plaguing Billy for years, just going, right, okay, this sucks. How do I make it better? You know, sort of thing. And the time we had on Bubba'n'Stix was a combination of that and going crazy, spending lots of late nights in the office, going nuts, coming up with ridiculous ideas for the game.
According to that, at present, video game industry hasn't, from my point of view, has not so much original products. You know, it's all about sports. It's all about very franchises or sagas, GTA 5. The FIFA, the PES. Do you think that is the reason that people at present it's going back to the roots, to the retro, to the emulators or to the old machines, looking for that type of original products? Because from my point of view, video game industry at present, it's all AAA games and all that stuff. It's all the same. You have a new FIFA, different name players. You have FPAs, different story, but the plot or the game is the same. Do you think that is the reason from the people is going back to the roots?
I think I think the thing is that it's one of the actual great things is that right now there's never been a bigger breadth of games. I think what happens is that there are the big hitters, the big summer blockbusters, and they are, you know, the budgets that you're working to on these big monolithic blockbusters are absolutely terrifying. The GDP of a small country, you know, sort of thing. When you actually look at those things, they are the big hitters, and just like the summer blockbuster movies, there's a lot of effort put into them, and they've got to work, and there's a huge lot of pressure. But I think the thing is that that's only if you look at the console market. If you actually look wider, there has never been a better time to be a gamer, you know, sort of thing. From the device that you can carry around in your hand, there are a million different little inventive games. There is, you know, the other week somebody introduced me finally, and I don't know how I missed this, to Thomas Was Alone, a game about little tiny blocks with, you know, kind of uber minimalist graphics and stuff like that. I think the thing is that what's happened is that there is and in the same way as there is, you know, we look at the summer blockbusters and go, there's a Michael Bay film and a Pirates of the Caribbean and all that lot. Yeah, there are the FIFAs, the GTAs, the Call of Duties and all that lot, and they're wonderful. But at the same time, we've, you know, if we're talking, you know, cinema and filmed entertainment, there's never been a greater time to be watching bajillions of channels of TV, YouTube, all of these sort of things. Everybody can make their own movies and post them and find entertainment and stuff like that. And I think the thing is that now when we've got, you know, I can play games for free in my web browser, my social network, my phone, my 3DS, my consoles, and now there's also the emulators, which, okay, a little bit shady, but I can actually have a cabinet in my house. Well, I haven't got one, we've got one in the office, which has all of the games that I was rubbish at in the 80s, and I can still play them. And I think that's, and I'd still be as rubbish as I was. To be honest, I think it's one of those kind of things of, yes, there will be the big blockbusters and everything, but you know, the thing is, it's about having enjoying the games that you want to play, embracing all games, because there is inventiveness all over the place, and you know, there is still crazy, surprising, unusual stuff coming out, you know, even now. But yeah, as I say, when we started back in the 80s, it literally was, I have an idea, make a game about a ball that does this, or make a game where the main character has a sentient stick. I think the thing is that can still happen. It's just to commit a massive budget to create a huge GTA Call of Duty, FIFA, Battlefield style hit, you'd have to convince an awful lot of people, an awful lot to do that and say why that's got to be on the screen. But you know, there are these wonderful little sleeper hits that still come out there where you suddenly go, hang on a moment, there's something in this, you know. And you know, I think there's never been a better time because there is this breadth. And also the other thing as well is that you know, gaming generations. We're all getting older. It's not something that, you know, there are people that are parents, there are people that are grandparents that play video games. It's not something that teenagers do in the bedrooms, and it's a weird sort of thing, you know. And say it'll still get knocked on TV occasionally. Oh, the games are too violent. No, they're doing simulated violence. There is a difference, you know, sort of thing. But the budgets for those big blockbusters are monolithic. But you know, anybody can make their own game in a web browser, and they can play it anywhere, you know, sort of thing. So to me, I think it's just a matter of broadening your mind and looking for those games wherever it happens to be, and enjoying them, you know.
So just a few questions more,
Sure.
Simon, not so much, in order to improve the time. Tell us to the Spanish audience, or to all audience who will be watching for this interview, what is your present work or your present activities? Are you designing for any other game, or you are doing comic books, or what are you doing now?
Right. So I've got the privilege of working for Criterion Games right now. A small bunch of us at the beginning of the year decided that what we wanted to do was to work on an absolutely brand new project. So a little tight team of 15, 16 of us have got together. We're working from a completely secret location, and we're working on something absolutely unlike anything we've worked on before, and having the time of our lives. We'll be, I'm sure, over fullness of time, you guys will hear about it and everything. So watch the social networks. But no, we decided that sort of coming out of the Need for Speed Most Wanted, we wanted to move on to something new, and so a little tiny team of us have got together, and we're rocking it, and we're having great fun. So that's all I can tell you at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's enough. And when you use your free time to play any kind of games, retro games or actual games?
Yeah, I must admit, my free time is split kind of like 4 ways. I do a lot of running. I spend a lot of time with my family. I do a lot of drawing and painting, and then the other stuff is say I'm multiplayer gaming is kind of where I'm at the moment, kind of thing. I've started to get personally a little bit tired of sitting on my own working through somebody else's story. I want to go out there and make my own or have fun with my friends. So that's been an awful lot of online multiplayer shooters with all of my mates and everything. So yeah, you know, kind of thing. Just playing the Battlefield 4 beta, looking forward to Xbox One and what's coming with that kind of thing, and lots of online multiplayer, lots of shouting and ranking up and everything. So that's kind of where I've got to at the moment. Fun with friends.
Okay, Sam. So thank you very much. It was a very good pleasure to speak with you, to talk with you about the retro and also about the Commodore Amiga. And just for our audience, the one who makes the Rick Dangerous scream at the death was you?
Yes, it was. Yeah. So 3, 2, 1. I think that was it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. No, it literally was Terry and I with a little cassette tape recorder with the little condenser mic, screaming into the microphone in the office for like half an hour, and then we digitized them and took the funniest things, and it just happened to be me.
Okay, that's all, Simon. Just another thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
I hope all the Spanish audience enjoy and all the people enjoy this interview. It's a pleasure and an honor to talk with you about those times. And thank you very much. If you want to tell any other thing to the people about the video industry or anything to
okay, I guess probably one of the things is that I do get asked quite a lot from people that want to get into the games industry, especially students and everything. You know, what do I have to do? What subjects do I have to learn? Well, the simple fact is, stay in school, learn as much as you can. All of the subjects that you're going to be doing, from art through English or Spanish or whatever languages, you know, maths, physics, learn the whole lot, because it all comes in. So whether you're writing, whether you're providing dialogue for voice script, whether you're jumping around in a motion capture suit for your drama, whether you're calculating how much force a big heavy object hits a other big heavy object and explodes it, whatever, something that you learn at school is going to come in. Trigonometry too, yes. Learn that, get qualified, play games, and then also try and make your own, because there's never been a better time to download the stuff. There are a million tutorials out there. There's free software out there. Get it, try it, play it, and then if you still love it, you know, with your qualifications, with your portfolio, with your website, knock on the door and say, you know, tell me why I shouldn't be working for you, because I love, and also the other one as well, if you're ever going for an interview, make sure that you play the games for the company that you're going to work for, because there's nothing worse than somebody who's never heard of the thing that you're talking about, and nothing better than when somebody comes in and goes, you know what, that bit on Burnout Paradise, we went round this corner, so and so, I know this corner, blah, 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 you know, or the piece that you made, I want to play that. It's wonderful. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. Stay in school, get qualified, love games, make your own, and then knock on the door and don't stop. But no, thank you so much, sir. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend a Sunday morning with you.
Okay, see you next time, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cool.
Hello, my friends. Well, since I recorded that interview back at the end of 2013, suffice to say, an awful lot's happened. You see, there were some big changes back at Electronic Arts Criterion Game Studios where I was working at the end of 2013, and that made me sort of think about what I really wanted. So going home for the holidays, I really had a chance to think about what I wanted to do, and whether kind of sticking with big teams and big projects was what I really wanted to keep on doing. As I say, I've worked on things like Harry Potter and Need for Speed over the past 20 years, and it's been an amazing journey, but there's nothing quite like making your own game. So in February 2014 I left Electronic Arts and started working on one of these things, an Android tablet. I'm now coding my own game, doing the art for it, designing it. It's all me, and it's a wonderful feeling. It's something unlike I've had for a very long time, feeling completely in control of my own destiny. And while I can't tell you exactly what's in this little slab at the moment, I can say that it's got a distinctly retro feel, and I'm sure that some of you out there will really like it. So yeah, I'm going to get my head down and keep on coding and hopefully make something really amazing for you all. But I'd also like to say thanks for everyone for all their support, all the kind emails, tweets and messages that you've sent over the years, and for thinking about all these great games that I've made, and I'm looking forward to making some more amazing things for you. So thanks ever so much. I'll see you soon. Follow me on Twitter, look out for me on my Facebook art page, look over at the website. Thanks again for watching this video, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.